On this path, it's very normal to want to have a peek or a glimpse at some kind of stimulating image or video, just to get a bit of pleasure, but without going too far. Now, is this okay, or is this something you should avoid? Well, the best place to start with this topic is to ask the following question. What is a peek or a glimpse, really? What is actually happening if you were to choose to have one? Well, a peek or a glimpse really is a lapse in your good judgment. It is a moment where you temporarily forget your higher vision or wisdom. It's where you are briefly misled by your mind, most likely because of a lack of perspective or consciousness. It's a time where your mind might justify a tiny little glimpse, and unfortunately, there might not be enough inner wisdom to help pull you through or back you up in making the right call. Now, we know that peaks and glimpses are not helpful, but are they really that bad? Are they really going to cause you harm? Well, as always, the answer is a matter of perspective. And the perspective that I'm going to start with is yes. Yes, they are. This is because they create spikes in your dopamine, something which can stimulate you to supernormal levels. And this can lead to both neurochemical imbalances, but also spiritual disharmony. And so to put it simply, they put you off your game and they prevent you from being at 100%. Now, it would be a lot easier if this wasn't the case, but peaks and glimpses, they also lead to an increase in temptation and an increase in sexual thoughts. For example, having had a peek at something PMO related, your lower lustful self is much, much stronger. And this can look like you feeling an unpleasantly high level of desire. You might find yourself being mentally or spiritually weaker, more prone to relapsing, and with lower levels of consciousness and joy. This happens because with peeking or glimpsing, you are feeding the lower self. Really appreciate that the lower self struggles to exist unless you give it your attention and your identification. The more that you slip into your lower self and identify with it, the more powerful the lower self becomes. Therefore, you want to be doing your very, very best to avoid these peaks and glimpses, because that will mean your lower self is not getting the sustenance that it needs to survive and be strong. The really simple way to look at this whole thing, which you will already know if you've been on this path for a while, is that peeking and glimpsing is not a wise act. It is not something you ever really want to do, nor is it something that you ever feel good about afterwards. Rather, peeking and glimpsing is this small act of escapism that causes more damage than we actually know of. This is because it's not about how many explicit things were seen. It's more about how part of you gave into those desires in the first place. And if you really feel inward, you can sense that any degree of you giving into the lust to satisfy your lower self is painful for that higher part of you, for your higher self or spirit. And not only is it spiritually painful, it's really just not in alignment with the kind of person that you know you truly are. Because again, if you really feel inward, there's a huge difference between the version of you that abstains and the version of you that allows for peaks and glimpses to happen. Your life is always going to be so much more aligned and so much more peaceful when it's your highest self that is making the decisions and not your lower self that is sneakily taking over. So again, make the right call and do your very best to turn these peaks and glimpses down. Another reason why peeking and glimpsing is so troublesome is that it's the single most risky and most dangerous trigger in existence. In fact, you cannot find a more triggering thing than a peek or a glimpse, because if you really think about it, you are consuming PMO itself. It's just not a smart idea at all, and it's also the closest that you can come to an actual full relapse. This is why, if you like, you can define these peaks and glimpses as micro-relapses, because you're exposing yourself partially, but not fully. And I'll say it again, the real killer is not the fact that you consumed some PMO, it's more so the fact that part of you gave into the lust. And really understand that this action of giving in is a lot more significant than we think. Because what it does is it weakens your subconscious strength and resistance to PMO. For example, the longer that you go without PMO, the more you kind of build up this unconscious defense where the deeper part of you knows and it's very clear that PMO is not something that you wish to include in your reality. However, by including it even just a little bit, your subconscious mind has a harder time of not feeding you the thoughts and mental images that relate to it. Therefore, my advice here is to, over time, actually completely surrender peaks and glimpses, because doing so will help you with not just partial freedom, but full freedom. And full freedom is the only thing that you're really looking for here. Another big reason that you don't want to peak or glimpse is the principle of what you consume stays in your consciousness. And this is because your mind, it's like a sponge. It absorbs whatever you expose it to. And this can have real dire consequences if you absorb something that's very explicit or very sexual. Because, and I'm sure you've noticed, these images and videos and whatever else, they don't go anywhere. Once PMO has been consumed, it doesn't just go away. It kind of lingers in your experience in a really annoying and unpleasant way. And this lingering of sexual thoughts can be a real pain to deal with, especially with how they take you away from the one thing that you want more than anything, and that is present moment awareness. And so if you want this real purity and real control over your personal reality, simply don't include any kind of PMO whatsoever. And it's okay if this takes you a while. Just know that this is the goal that you want to work toward, because having this level of purity really does make a big difference. To give you an example of a change that I've made personally this year is I quit Instagram, and one big reason for this was how I could see that peaks and glimpses were technically happening all the time. All it would really take was just 1 or 2 clicks on the explore page, in other words, the least conscious place on earth, and suddenly something very explicit would just pop up. Now, for me personally, I simply could not afford to have this happening anymore, especially because I could see how subconsciously all of this kind of softcore content was being consumed and taken in by the mind. Again, it doesn't just go away, it's in your consciousness now, and it's really quite unpleasant when it's there. I would even say that it kind of makes you feel more like a consumer or more like a zombie, and this is not the kind of life that you should be interested in whatsoever. Also, to really emphasize this point, I don't actually watch horror movies anymore, and it's not because they're not fun or entertaining, it's simply because I don't wish to include those kind of things in my consciousness. Because when you get very serious and very honest with how the stuff that you consume stays in your mind and consciousness, you will want to take action to purify what you consume. And most people will deny this. They'll say, yeah, no, it's just social media, or yeah, no, it's just a movie. But what they may not be conscious of, or what they may not realize, is that the subconscious mind is going to be absorbing it all like a sponge, regardless. Now, again, the person might not be sensitive enough to realize this, but in truth, it is going to be consumed and is going to be taken in whether they like it or not. And for me, it was realizing this in my own life which inspired me to make these changes. And to be honest, I encourage you to make similar changes if you feel that you're able to. So, I hope this video has been helpful. Remember to keep doing your best and allow yourself to be wherever you're at right now. And as always, if you enjoyed this one and would like more, then my friend, please do subscribe.